I'd like to invite the guests for our next panel discussion to the stage. Dr. Lynn Ramsey, Professor Anne Ledwith and Dr. Kevin Marshall. If you could please make your way to the stage, because in this section we're going to explore the impact of the MicroCreds Project on the higher education sector here in Ireland. And we're also going to look to the future, as Vivian has alluded to there, and explore what steps need to be put in place to maintain Ireland's position as a leader in Europe in micro-credentials, which I mentioned from the outset, because we are a leader, and Vivian also mentioned the recognition that is there internationally beyond Ireland for this project. So I'm delighted to be joined now by Dr. Lynn Ramsey, who's Chief Executive Officer for Quality and Qualifications in Ireland, the QQI, as you will all in the room be familiar with. Lynn was formerly CEO of the Teaching Council, Director of the MicroCreds in the Irish Universities Association, and served as Chair of the National Forum for Teaching and Learning and Board Director of the Higher Education Authority. Professor Anne Ledwith, Interim Provost and Deputy President of the University of Limerick. Professor Ledwith has held many leadership positions across UL and across many of the roles that Anne is responsible for, is delivering UL's Human Capital Initiative project, that's UL at Work, which aims to develop digital industry 4.0 talent. We're getting that right, I hope I am, through flexible and innovative learning, linking enterprise and education, which is what this is all about. And Dr. Kevin Marshall, who's head of future skilling at Microsoft Ireland and chair of the National Skills Council. And Kevin has extensive cross-sectoral education and industry experience working for Microsoft Ireland for the past 20 years, with the last 10 years as head of future skilling. And you've also been appointed, Kevin, as adjunct professor in the Assisted Living and Learning Institute in Maynooth University. I need to do a few MicroCreds courses to keep up with all these qualifications, but we go on. You're very welcome all here today. Lynn, I'm going to come to you first. Like, from your involvement, because you're involved in the very early stages of the project and now in your current role, what do you think has the MicroCreds project demonstrated about assuring standards for micro-credentials at scale?
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here today, I have to say that. It's amazing to be at this stage of the journey and to have seen it from the early stages now to these huge numbers coming through. We've just concluded a piece of consultation on micro-credentials within QQI. It just closed there on 23rd of January, and there was huge interest in the consultation. We extended out the period and we got great depth of consultation back, and one of the clear features that came back from everyone who responded was that piece around quality assurance was pivotal. Having something connected with the National Framework of Qualifications was really important. Having something that was credit-bearing, really important. So those kind of things that are fundamental to talk about the trust and confidence that a learner might have, we've seen from that consultation, and it was part and parcel of all the work of MicroCreds at the very beginning. And we did the potential learner consultations. We could see that was really important to people. It was important to the learners that would give of their time and energy. It was important to enterprise so that they knew the quality of what they were getting back. So that part, I think, is fundamental to both the MicroCreds project, but what we've seen across all of FET and HE in terms of the consultation that's come back to us.
Talk to me a little bit about the quality assurance and what role that plays in building employer and learner confidence, which is what it's all about, in micro-credentials.
It's an interesting piece, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we talk about the need for innovation, flexibility, and so on, and moving quickly. And those are not things that we maybe would traditionally have associated with quality assurance, which might be very process heavy. But it's looking at the quality of the outcome and looking at quality assurance processes in a way where you can adapt them and move them so that they're appropriate to the size of the qualification that's moving through, but gives reassurance to the learner and to all of the stakeholders as to what has been done. So they're fundamental, I think, in attesting to the quality, and it's what we do really well in an Irish context.
Well, thank you, Lynn. And to bring you in here from an institutional perspective, what has it taken to embed micro-credentials alongside the very traditional programs that people would be used to at third level and in UL?
Yeah, I suppose across the sector, universities have always done shorter courses and things like this, but what the MicroCred project allowed us to do was to really consolidate how we were approaching that and what we were doing with that. I think Lynn is dead right, the whole accreditation piece was really, really important for us. and to have programs that were accredited through our standard accreditation processes that met the quality standards that we would apply to all of our programs was a critical part of the project. I think one of the things that we did at UL that worked really well was to establish a MicroCred advisory group that was cross-institutional, so that we were talking both to academics in the particular areas, but also to the professional staff that were providing the different services. And that, I think, was one of the pivotal things that we did that really, really helped us. A challenge for MicroCreds, I suppose, is that they are much shorter programs, and we're used to registering students for 4 years or a year or whatever else. So we did have to look at how that worked and look at the overhead of bringing a student on for something that's very, very short compared to bringing a student on for a much larger piece of learning. But again, I think there's continued learning across all of that, and that's something that we will certainly continue even after the project has started, as we continue to work with MicroCreds. I think another thing that has helped embed it, and it's back to, I think it was Ken who was saying when they were talking about the areas that MicroCreds are offered in. I was just kind of jotting down the different areas that he mentioned. And what I found really interesting was that an awful lot of those map onto our key research areas. So he was talking about things about the environment, about AI, about healthcare, about biopharma. And those are the areas that we've seen research funding that we're all working on. Again, this is across the sector. And I think that link between being able to say we are hosting state-of-the-art research in these areas.
You are a hub for this.
Exactly. And
in any case.
Yes,
so
yeah.
Come on board and we'll be able to bring you into our program in a way, I suppose, that can be done short, weeks rather than years, and has a good end result.
And that has helped, but that alignment has helped a lot,
Yeah.
I think, in terms of linking it to our research interests as well as to reaching out to industry and developing those relationships then between industry, learning, research, and having that nice triangle going there is really useful.
You have to strike that balance. I mean, and about, I suppose, universities ensuring academic integrity while delivering these flexible, short courses that are industry responsive. And does that require, and I'm interested when you said about that, sort of those kind of cross-party talks that probably took place between, lecturers, academics on the courses, and then what enterprise and what industry needed. Does it require a change of mindset?
It does to an extent, and it needs to be fully facilitated so that kind of our more traditional academics can see the benefit of engaging in programs like this. We've also seen that our MicroCreds are serving really well as pathways into larger programs. So for somebody in industry who just wants to kind of dip their toes, whether it's in AI or learning about battery technology, that they can do that through a short MicroCred, and if they like it, then they can move further into a longer program and a longer course. But a lot of what the project has facilitated, I suppose, is to make that connection, to bring people with us, and it's given kind of a platform to allow that, to engage with industry, but to bring the relevant academics along as well.
Thank you for that, Anne. And to Kevin, to bring you in, and we've been listening to what this panel has to say, and obviously in the previous panel as well, talking about the skills gap that exists. From your perspective and a national skills planning perspective, how can micro-credentials strengthen our responsiveness to emerging skills needs?
So let me just step back a second before I answer the question. So I have taken a couple of MicroCreds in the last 18 months.
Oh, have you?
Really interesting, because I think there's a point about the pedagogy, the teaching and learning and the assessment that I think the project has demonstrated. What works well, what doesn't, and what we need to think about going forward. So I took one that was 6 weeks, too short, too much time in, really good, but for a learner, for me, too short. Took one that was 12 weeks, much easier, more time, all flexible online, really interesting stuff. And then we've developed our own MicroCred and Microsoft on foundations in AI that we delivered before Christmas. Again, 10 weeks, online and then face-to-face. The big challenge is in the assessment. How do you do online assessment? Very difficult. And how do you do it offline? So they're the challenges that I see in terms of the work that I do in terms of embedding the MicroCred initiative and the thinking, because the thinking is superior. It's what we needed. It's what the country needs. So if you look at the skills gap, I think the way I see it is, so there's a massive shift in workforce development, right? More profound than I think we really realize, and harder than we realize through, and it's you know, everyone talks about AI, it's more machine learning, automation. So one of the questions that we grapple with, or I grapple with at work, is what does the world of work look like in a post-automated world, all right? So if you look at AI and you look at agentic AI, you know, this is the next big thing. How do we develop talent? How do we think about leaders? How do we manage in that space? So I was at a presentation last night where Diageo and Kerry were talking about how they've automated all their processes, and we in Microsoft are doing the same. So you're fundamentally shifting. So the skills needs are constant. The requirements to keep pace with the technology is 24/7. How do you build systems in that place? And I think one of the values of the microcredit is that if accredited learning is important to the organization, and we have a flexible model that I think we can build over time and adapt to be to meet that particular need.
It's really important. You're talking about all this automated AI, and we're just trying to keep up with it.
Yeah,
That then
really
these courses can also keep pace.
But I think we
with the
have
changes you're
demonstrated
seeing.
that there's agility and flexibility in the system, that we can do this, because traditionally, you know, what made the country really successful over the last 30 years was predicated on a level 8 degree that most of us went through from, you know, like the mid-80s to the 2020s. That has shifted. Post-COVID, that has shifted. And I think if you look at some of the universities and some of the people around here, is that there's discussions around skills academies. I mean, I think it is equally important that we teach tender as the night as we teach about large language models, but we need to find a balance in how we do that. And I think the next iteration of this program, and the idea that the system can deal with microcreds and short courses, and that thinking, when we've now developed a model, allows us to think about, well, particularly at undergrad level, how do you think about the traditional course model, but how do you run a skills academy in parallel to that? Is that something we need to think about? We know from the Department of Finance data that was published in the summer of 24, I think it was, that we need to upskill 1 million people in the next 5 years across a whole range of disciplines. And it's all laid out there in their model. We also know from the ASI report
yesterday. Are you saying
yesterday.
the traditional academic model does not serve the skills that are required?
No, I think we need to adapt it. I think over time it needs to adapt. We just need a balanced approach that I think, in addition to standard economic, we need to teach
They're the
certain amounts of
fundamentals,
skills.
but then you should be able to add on in blocks.
So how do we think
Yeah.
about that? And I think and I mean, John will probably talk about this later. I mean, Cork have a model, UCD have a model. They're really interesting models about academies and how we build this and how, because what you want, and what Anne talked about, you also want all the great research that's going on through the research centre filtering down quicker into the curriculum, so that we're ahead of this, because that all drives competitiveness, you know, cutting edge skills. And I think the shorter, how do we do that? How do we do that better? I think the fact that we've been able to deliver a program like this and Springboard over the last decade shows that the system is agile, can respond. I think the need is going to increase, and I think that's what we've got to think about. So that means there's a funding issue, there's a teaching and learning issue, there's a quality assurance issue. But I think all the building blocks are here. I think Paul talked about at the beginning of system level disruptors. I think we are in a big system level disruption, and I think we've got some of the building blocks to build a bit of coherence in the system. And I think at Skills Council, we're trying to think about what's the coherence from 6 to 86 in terms of learning, and then particular focus on green and SME. Talked about earlier, that we need the SMEs to really drive the economy in the next decade or so, given the challenges to the existing business model we have. I think that's the challenge I see.
Yeah, When you lay it out like that, it's a big challenge, but
I think we have
but this model,
well, it's part of it.
From how you've all been speaking today, has proven that it can be done, and that sort of agile response. That's not always typical in this country, it has to be said, but it's really welcome to see it within this project. But Lynn, as we're looking to the future, and the future that's been outlined there by Kevin as well, how can Ireland balance innovation, flexibility in micro-credentials and lifelong learning with the need for that quality consistency and learner protection as well?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that this project demonstrated, but also when we look across the whole of the tertiary system, we saw that actually we had a system that was quite flexible. Our national framework of qualifications always had the capacity for smaller types of awards, and indeed, particularly in the technological university sector, they would have had a long history of working in that way, and talked about how UL were already doing some of that kind of thing. But thinking about it at scale, thinking about the learner that might come having never been in a structured learning environment before, and allowing them move in and through, I think, in a more coherent way is our next challenge. Thinking about micro-credentials alongside recognition of prior learning and what that might do to support someone move at different stages of their career. So we have great opportunities. We're out to look at all aspects of the National Framework of Qualifications at the moment within QQI. We've gone out for a consultation on some elements of it, and we'll be taking a pause now to look at what all of that means, and then come back out to the system with a roadmap to say these things are connected and here are the stages we're going to move through. And I think the other part that serves us really well is we're doing this in a consistent European context. So one of the things that came through really strongly as we were working through microcreds, and now as QQI have gone out to consultation, is that European definition of what a microcredential is well balanced, fits very well within an Irish context. We were able to shape and influence what that looked like. So we have a lot of inherent flexibility. I think the next stage for us is all to think about that national framework of qualifications and sit down collectively to see from FET to HE, what would that look like as a tertiary system. So some of the earlier speakers talked about the ability to collaborate, the ability for a learner to move across, the confidence that an employer might have that works across all of our system, so we can have a whole of system approach, respecting the flexibility of different sectors at the same time. But we absolutely have all of the building blocks here already.
Yeah, and to come back to you in the university space, how do you see micro-credentials contributing to that long-term mission of universities in lifelong learning? Where does MicroCreds fit in there, and has it informed you?
Absolutely. I think they're a critical part of it, because as Kevin has said, and as we've heard from earlier speakers, there is a shift happening in education, and that our four-year degrees are really just the starting point for an awful lot of people within the workforce. And MicroCreds are a key part of that. Like, one of the things that we've done is that we have integrated MicroCreds into existing offerings, so that we're creating those pathways as we're creating our microcreds, and that's very important for us. That I think this notion of I'll pick 6 random microcreds in there and you'll give me a degree doesn't really kind of bear scrutiny. That really we need structured learning pathways, so that by the time you come through a degree, you actually have a strong, coherent piece of learning, and that's one of the things that universities have done, have always done, is that
and you can build on your microcreds.
Exactly, yeah. So we've designed learning that works for learners. So I think that's really, really important. I mean, I think the other thing that's important going forward, and it's something that Vivian alluded to earlier on, is just the recognition within the funding model of flexible learning, of lifelong learning, of professional learning. That's critical for us, because all of us within our institutions are trying to champion this. But if we're not getting that kind of institutional support, it does make it much more difficult. So it's really welcome to hear Vivian talking about looking at the core funding model and reviewing how that funding model might recognise these types of learnings in a far more concrete way. And I think the other thing that's important for us is that we tend to see, calls for, funding calls coming out at various intervals. And it's the continuity across all of this, because we've heard earlier this morning about the fantastic teams that were put in place to deliver the MicroCred project, and the impact that has had, not only in Ireland, but I think we are being viewed from Europe, and I know we certainly get calls from Europe, as being an exemplar in how we have done this. And I think we should be really, really proud of what we've done. but it's to be able to continue that and to have kind of joined up thinking around how we fund that, how we fund the activity. And particularly, as Ken was saying, back into SMEs, because SMEs are key for our economy. They're the slowest to engage in this kind of education. Some of it is around funding. Some of it is also around, you know, if you deal with a big company, you have a training manager who can visit you for half a day and talk about all of their training needs. You don't have that in a small company. So we really need to get much better at engaging SMEs, and we need to look at mechanisms to do that much more effectively.
Kevin, you're nodding away there. You know all about that because you're from the big company that has, I suppose, you are the skills expert within Microsoft. So, like, I just want to get an idea of what success looks like for the skills ecosystem if micro-credentials are fully embedded. Say, you know, years from now, I mean, the steps and strong steps forward have been made, and as Anna's alluded to there, it's received that international recognition as well.
So, I mean, I think they become the core fundamental tenet of scale. You have 20,000 learners thus far. We need 1 million. So where does the micro-credentials idea and the model we built help us scale the
Can it be done? Can it be done? If you're saying 20,000 to date, 1 million required.
Well, I mean,
how quickly can we build that to scale?
That depends on how we fund it and how we think about it. But I mean, that is the question. I mean, and I think, like, it's a really scary question, right? It's really difficult. The minister was out, Minister Laws was talking at the weekend about 1 million upskilling in AI, right? So we've got to grapple with that, right? But it's not, like, it can't all be done online. It can't all be, like, it's a collective response. What I'm saying is, this is a model that I think has worked really well. We've learned lots. There's other things we would do. You've got a springboard model as well that needs to integrate into this. So I think that's the point I would say. If we didn't have this, we'd be grappling with it, I think, in a different way. Because I think what's important is quality insurance is really important, and that the qualifications and the learning actually means something, and the system recognizes that, because I think that's important. Sometimes it's easy to just go off and do a training course. No, that's not what we need here. That's part of the solution. But I think assurances that the quality is there, that the integrity of the system is there, I think is really important. And I think we've built a model to do that.
All right.
And I think at this, probably, it'll take more tweaking, would be a core fundamental tenet of how I think we tackle the 1 million upskilling and more. And I think the other thing is that the reality of work over the next decade or so and beyond is that we're always going to have to be learning, right? And I think, you know, we talk about being great, like, you know, the land of saints and scholars. Like, the data, we're not the best at lifelong learning on a European perspective. Our data, you know, we're PEC data and stuff around 16%. So we need to think about.
Why is that?
I have no idea. I really don't. I mean, and I think yesterday on the
Busy
SRI, the
lives,
gender
in
gap.
a job.
I think time is a big issue. Yeah, I think time is a big issue. I think there's so much demands for our time that it's maybe we're still in a bit of maybe it's a mind shift issue.
But what you seem to be saying is we won't really have a choice in the matter because that upskilling will be required.
Well, I think if we want to maintain what we
careers to be
have and be
sustainable.
competitive and build for the future, I think we've got to start rethinking these and reframing these questions and challenging ourselves and using all the good work that the HCI projects have done over the last decade. It's all there. You just need to put it together.
Lynn, before we go, I just want to ask you about, and pardon me if you've answered it in part, but where micro-credentials now fit within the national framework of qualifications that covers your junior cert right up to your doctorate. Because the confidence and recognition piece is very important. So, I mean, where do they now fit right now?
Yeah, so right now they're, I suppose, already embedded within the National Framework of Qualifications in the sense that there was always capacity for doing minor awards. The bigger conversation is where the disruption of projects like MicroCreds.ie and what learning we have as we look at the National Framework of Qualifications now, some years since it took off. There's really interesting spaces I think we've still to explore. So certainly the MicroCreds work from this project and from our consultation looked at from levels 1 to 9. We had a quite interesting conversation with colleagues around about level 10 to say, is there something in that space? Is there something about that space about having a supplemental award that might take cutting edge research right into industry and back and forth. There's something there that's really interesting to explore. So I think our next stage within QQI will be analysing the data. We've got fantastic inputs from right across tertiary, as I said, and to get a conversation then, because it is a national framework, it's not a part sector framework, but there's rich learning, and it's to think of the learner and the end user and the public in all of that to bring coherence. But I think we have all of the elements there, and we're a really exciting space to take advantage of that and to crystallise that for ourselves. Yeah.
That's great. Great thoughts to end this conversation on. Thanks to you all. My thanks to Lynn, to Anne and to Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks,